She called on a Wednesday evening. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was busy, because the name on the screen produced a specific feeling. Not pain exactly, not after several years. Just the particular weight of something you have put down but not fully set aside. I answered. She said she wasn't calling to reopen anything. Said it immediately, before I could form whatever response I was preparing. She said she had been doing some work on herself, and that part of that work had led here to this call. She said she owed me an apology, a real one, not the vague general version that covers everything without addressing anything. A specific one. She asked if I was willing to hear it. I said I would think about it. She said, of course. I put the phone down and sat with the specific strangeness of a call I had not expected from a person I had spent considerable energy moving away from. I called her back 3 days later, said I was willing to listen. What followed across the next several weeks was not what I expected an apology to feel like, not what I expected forgiveness to feel like, not what I expected any of it to feel like. But to understand why it landed the way it did, you need to know what we had been. Sarah and I had been together for 3 years. Not 3 years of constant difficulty. 3 years of something that had been genuinely good for most of its duration, and had ended in a way that made the goodness harder to hold on to than the ending. We met in our late 20s. Both of us established enough to know ourselves reasonably well. Both of us at a stage where a relationship was not just the automatic next thing, but a genuine choice. Something entered into with the specific awareness of two adults who understood what they were choosing. She was the kind of person who brought her full intelligence to everything, not just professionally, to conversations, to ideas, to the particular texture of a relationship. She was engaged with things in a way I found consistently interesting. The relationship had the quality of something that grows more interesting over time rather than less, which is not as common as people pretend. I had loved her, genuinely, not the performed version of love that exists at the beginning of things. The deeper version, the one that develops when you have known someone through enough varied circumstances to understand who they actually are, and have chosen them anyway. Her career was important to her. I had always known that. I considered it one of the things I respected about her. The specific focus and ambition of someone who understood what they were building professionally and took it seriously. I had not wanted her to be different. I want to be clear about that, because the story of what went wrong is not the story of a man who wanted his partner to be less ambitious. It is the story of the specific and cumulative way that one person's priorities can make another person feel consistently secondary, without either of them fully seeing it happening. The pattern built gradually, as patterns do. The first time a planned evening was canceled because something came up at work, I had understood completely. Work does that. Life does that. Flexibility is a reasonable thing to offer someone you love. The second time I understood it. The 10th time I was still understanding it. The 20th time, the understanding was starting to cost something. Not the individual cancellation. The accumulated weight of what the pattern was saying. That when a conflict arose between me and something else, the something else won. Consistently. Not always dramatically. Sometimes in small ways. The phone that was too present at dinners. The mental absence in conversations that should have had her full attention. The specific quality of being with someone who is physically present and partially elsewhere. I had tried to address it, not immediately, after the pattern had become clear enough to name. I had named it. She had received it, had been genuinely responsive in the moment, had said the right things, had made adjustments that lasted for a period. Then the pattern had reasserted itself, because the pattern was not a decision she was making. It was an orientation, the deep default of someone whose primary identity lived in the professional space, and who had not yet understood what that meant for the person who loved her. I had walked away after the third conversation that followed the same arc. Concern raised, genuine response, temporary adjustment, pattern reasserting. I had understood that I could not have the version of the relationship I needed within the version of herself she was operating from, and that staying was going to cost me more than leaving. So I left, with real pain, real resentment at the specific experience of having been genuinely present in something that had not been able to be genuinely returned, and with the specific grief of losing something that had contained real value, even if the real value had not been enough. The years after the relationship followed the pattern that years after relationships follow. The early period of adjustment, the gradual rebuilding of a life that had been partially organized around another person. The specific work of disentangling yourself from someone who has been genuinely important, which takes longer than you expect and produces more than you expect, because the disentangling requires you to understand yourself more clearly than you did inside the relationship, to locate the parts of yourself that have been accommodating rather than genuinely comfortable, to recognize the specific ways the relationship had shaped your behavior, and to decide which of those shapes you wanted to keep. I had done that work, taken the time it required, not quickly, not as a performance of having moved on, actually moved on, build a life that was fully mine, that didn't have the particular hollow quality of a life waiting for something to return. I dated. Over the years, some of those relationships had been real, had produced genuine connection, had been entered into with the specific openness of someone who had processed the previous experience enough to be present for the next one. None of them had become permanent, not because of Sarah, because the circumstances had not produced the right fit. I was content with my life, genuinely, not the performed contentment of someone who is managing their presentation. The actual version. I had work I found meaningful, friendships that were real, the particular quality of a life built around things that actually mattered to me. I thought about Sarah occasionally, less as the years passed. The way you think about someone when the relationship has been genuinely processed, not with ongoing pain, with the particular quality of memory that has been separated from its emotional charge. Just images and recollections with their original feeling drained away. The way photographs of old places look. Real, but at a distance. When her name appeared on my phone, I had not thought about her in several months. The feeling the name produced told me something. Not pain, not the pull of something unresolved, just the weight I described. The specific weight of a chapter that had been closed but not sealed, that still had a quality of unfinished about it. Not because I had not moved on, because the ending had not been the right kind of ending. It had been an exit. My exit, made because staying was costing more than leaving. Not a resolution, not a conclusion that had left both people with something clean. Just me walking away from something that was hurting me, without the conversation that might have sealed the chapter properly. I had not known what that conversation would look like, had not known it was available, had not been sure it was something I needed, until the call happened. And I sat with the 3 days before I called back, and recognized the specific shape of what the weight was. Not the relationship, not the loss of what we had been, the ending, the way it had concluded, without the particular closure that honest endings can provide, without either of us having said the full, true thing. I had said I was leaving. She had received it. We had managed the practical separation without the emotional one, and had both moved on, carrying the weight of an ending that had not quite finished. I called her back on the 3rd day, told her I was willing to listen, and meant it, not as a performance of generosity, as a genuine choice. To finally have the conversation the ending had not contained, whatever form it was going to take. The first conversation was careful, on both sides. The specific carefulness of two people who have history between them and who are navigating the opening of something that could go several ways. She had prepared, not in the way that produces a performance, in the way that genuine preparation produces. The clarity of someone who has thought carefully about what they need to say, and who has practiced saying it not to polish the delivery, but to ensure they say what they actually mean. She started by acknowledging that she understood why I might have been reluctant to call back, that the call had asked something of me, that she appreciated the willingness. Then she began. The apology was not the vague general version that covers everything without addressing anything. I want to describe it accurately because the specificity of it was the thing that made it different from every other version of this kind of conversation I had expected it to be. She named specific incidents, not on a list, in the way of someone who has examined something carefully and arrived at a genuine understanding of its constituent parts. She named the evening I planned for her birthday that she had arrived late too. Not just late, distracted for the first hour, checking her phone, half present. She said she had understood at the time that I was hurt, had managed the moment rather than sitting with what it meant, had told herself the work situation had been genuinely urgent, which had been true, and had used the truth of it to avoid examining the pattern it was part of. She named the holiday we had taken, where she had worked for the first 3 days. In the accommodation, we had booked specifically to be away. She said she had understood I had been angry about that, had received my anger and had addressed it in the moment, had not understood until much later what it had actually cost me. The specific experience of being with someone who is not really with you, in a place you had gone specifically to be together. She named the conversation, the third one, where I had said the same thing for the third time, and she had received it and had made the same adjustments, and the same thing had happened again. She said she had not understood at the time what that third conversation had meant, that it had been the moment I had understood something she had not yet understood about herself, that she was not capable in that version of herself of giving me what I needed. Not because she hadn't wanted to, because she had not yet understood that wanting to was not sufficient, that the wanting needed to be accompanied by something structural, a genuine shift in how she was oriented, not a temporary adjustment, a change in the default. She said the work she had done in therapy had produced that shift, not quickly, over years, through the specific painful process of examining what she had prioritized and why, what the career had been providing her with beyond the professional outcomes, the specific ways it had been functioning as a container for things she had not been willing to feel. She said she understood now that she had used the work the way some people use substances, as a management strategy, as a way of keeping her interior life at a distance, as a reason to be elsewhere even when she was present, and that the people who had loved her had paid the price of that management. I listened to all of this without interrupting. The specific attention of someone who is receiving something carefully constructed and who is assessing it, not for the sake of assessment, because the assessment was the real work of the conversation. The question beneath everything she was saying was not whether she was sorry. It was whether she was different, whether the account she was giving reflected something actual. A person who had genuinely examined something and arrived somewhere different, or a person who had learned the language of self-examination and was deploying it in the service of a desired outcome. Those produce similar-sounding accounts. They feel completely different, and I was paying attention to how this one felt. We spoke for more times over the following 3 weeks, not because the first conversation had been insufficient, because I was not ready to arrive at a conclusion before the conversations had produced what they needed to produce. The assessment I had begun in the first call needed time, needed the conversations to develop beyond the prepared account, into the ordinary terrain of two people talking, where the genuine version of a person tends to emerge more clearly than in the constructed version. Performed change has a specific quality. It is most convincing in the prepared moments, in the opening statement, in the specific apology, in the particular language that therapy produces, which is real language, but which can also be learned without the learning being accompanied by actual transformation. What I was watching for was the person who existed outside the prepared moments, in the passing comments, in the reactions to things I said, in how she talked about her current life, about the work, about the relationships she had now, about the things she was still finding difficult. And what I found across those 4 conversations was something I had not fully anticipated. I found someone who had genuinely changed. Not completely. People do not change completely. She was still the person who had been shaped by the same history, who still had the same fundamental intelligence and the same particular way of engaging with ideas. But underneath those continuities, something was different. The orientation was different. The specific quality of someone who has done the interior work was visible, not in dramatic declarations, in small things, in the fact that when I challenged something she had said, she did not manage the challenge. She engaged with it, stayed in the discomfort of being questioned without the immediate move toward resolution that avoidance produces. In the fact that when she talked about her current relationship, she talked about it with the specific awareness of someone who understood their own patterns, who could name what was difficult and why, who was not hiding from the difficult parts by finding reasons they didn't apply. In the fact that when the conversation touched on something that would previously have produced the managed response, the smooth professional pivot away from what was actually being said, she stayed with it, let it be what it was, responded from inside it rather than from a position adjacent to it. I noticed these things, filed them, continued the conversations. In the fore conversation, I said something directly. I told her I had been assessing, that I had not arrived at the first call ready to forgive, had arrived ready to listen and to decide what the listening produced. She said she understood that she had not expected forgiveness, had not called hoping for it, had called because the work she had done had made the call the right thing to do, regardless of outcome, that she owed me the specific apology, the precise account, the acknowledgement that was several years late, and that what I chose to do with the receiving of it was entirely mine. I asked her what she had been hoping for. She thought about it, said she had hoped I was well, that the relationship had not left something in me that was still costing something, that the person she had cared about was living a life that was genuinely good, said it without the particular quality of something calculated to produce an effect, with the simple quality of something true. I sat with the full account of the 4 conversations, everything I had observed, everything she had said, the prepared version and the unprepared version, the performance of change and the genuine evidence of it underneath the performance. And I arrived at a conclusion. She had done the work. Not perfectly, not completely, in the way that people do the work when the work is real. Messily, incompletely, with the specific jagged edges of genuine transformation that does not produce a finished product. Just a person who is more honest with themselves and more capable of being honest with others. Because of that honesty, I told her I believed her, said it directly, not as the beginning of something larger, just as the answer to the question her calls had been asking, whether the work was real. It was. I believed it was. And that changed what was possible next. The forgiveness did not arrive as a single moment. I want to describe that accurately because I think the way forgiveness actually works is different from how it tends to be represented. It is not a decision made in a specific conversation that then takes immediate effect. It is more like a process that the decision initiates, a gradual release that happens over time, in the quiet of ordinary days, rather than in the dramatic moment of the conversation that begins it. I told her I believed her. That was the beginning, the moment I chose to accept what the assessment had produced, to move toward the forgiveness rather than continuing to hold the position of withholding it. But the weight did not lift immediately in that moment. It began to lift, the way things begin when the right conditions have been created, slowly, without announcement. In the days after the conversation, I noticed something. When I thought about the relationship now, about the specific incidents she had named, about the pattern that had accumulated across 3 years, the quality of the memory was different, not the memories themselves, the quality of how they sat in me, the specific resentment that had lived underneath some of them, the particular soreness of feeling consistently secondary, had begun to soften. Not because what had happened had changed, because what she had done in the calls had changed something about what it meant. Resentment has a specific relationship with the story we tell about an experience. It persists most strongly when the story contains injustice without acknowledgement. When the person who caused the pain has not recognized what they did, has not named it, has not taken it seriously. When the weight you are carrying is invisible to the person who put it there. She had named it, had recognized it, had taken it seriously in the most specific way available to her. The account she had given across those conversations was not a general sorry. It was an exact accounting, an inventory of specific moments, with the understanding of what each had cost, and with the genuine recognition that the cost had been real. That changed the story. Not what happened, what it meant. The injustice was still there, but the acknowledgement had been placed alongside it. An acknowledgement changes the weight of injustice in a specific way, does not remove it, balances it with something. The recognition that the person who caused the harm has looked at it directly, has not looked away, has sat with the discomfort of seeing it, and has said the true thing. That is not nothing. It is something significant, and it was doing something real in me across the days after the conversation. I called a close friend, told him about the calls, about the apology, about the assessment, about where I had arrived. He listened, then asked how I felt. I said lighter, not resolved exactly. Lighter. He said that sounded right. That forgiveness, when it is real, tends to feel like that. Not a dramatic shift, a lightening, the specific physical quality of something being set down, that you had been carrying so long you had stopped noticing the weight, until it was no longer there. I thought about that, about what I had been carrying without fully knowing I was carrying it. The resentment had not been consuming, had not been the defining feature of my life, had been present, in the background, affecting things in small ways I had not fully accounted for. A specific tension in how I thought about the past, a quality of unfinished in the chapter. That had been there, and that was beginning not to be there. I spoke to Sarah one more time, the fifth conversation, the one where the assessment had concluded and what remained was simply two people being honest with each other, without the weight of what had been unresolved between them. I told her I had forgiven her, not performing the statement, saying what was actually true. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said thank you. Said it simply, without elaboration, without making it the centerpiece of something larger. Just received it, the way you receive something you were not expecting, that arrives anyway, and that you understand is not for you to hold for long, just to acknowledge and let pass through. We met once in person, about a month after the final call, not to reopen anything, to close it properly, the way it should have been closed the first time, with both people present, with the honest account of what had been between them, and with the specific quality of a goodbye that knows it is a goodbye, rather than an exit that one person makes alone. We chose somewhere neutral, a place neither of us had been together, without the accumulated associations of somewhere familiar. She was already there when I arrived, which felt right. The person who had asked for the conversation, present before the person who had agreed to have it. We had coffee, talked for about 2 hours, not about the relationship specifically, about our lives, who we had become, what the years had produced, the particular catching up of two people who had mattered to each other and had then been absent from each other's lives, who were now briefly in the same space, seeing each other clearly, without the particular distortion that proximity and unresolved feeling produces. She had continued the therapy, was in a relationship, described it with the specific awareness of someone who understood their own patterns in it, who was present in it differently than she had been present in ours, who could name what was difficult without the management that difficulty had previously required. I listened, found genuine warmth in what she described, not the complicated warmth of someone who still has a stake in the other person's happiness, the clean warmth of someone who wants good things for a person they once loved, without the wanting being attached to any specific outcome. She asked about my life. I told her honestly, about the work, about where things stood, about the particular quality of a life I had built that felt genuinely mine. She said I seemed different from the person she had known. I asked her how. She said more settled, more at ease in my own skin, like someone who had found the shape that fit them, rather than accommodating the shape of something external. I said she seemed different too, more present, more able to be in a conversation without part of her being elsewhere. She said that was the work, that she had spent years learning to actually be where she was, to stop using the next thing as a way of avoiding the current one. She said it had been the hardest thing she had done, said it without the particular pride that people sometimes bring to the account of their own transformation, with the honest recognition of someone who understands what it cost and what was worth. At some point toward the end of the 2 hours, the conversation arrived at something that neither of us had planned, but that felt like the natural destination. The honest accounting of what we had been. Not forensic, not designed to produce anything. Just true. She said she had loved me, that the relationship had been real, that the real things she had done wrong in it had been real wrongs. Not because she had not cared, because she had not yet understood how to be present for someone she cared about, in the way that caring required. I said the relationship had been genuinely good, that what had been good about it was real, that what had gone wrong had also been real, and that both of those things could be true simultaneously, without either of them canceling the other. She said she was glad I had called back. I said I was too, not because the calls had changed what had happened, because they had changed what it meant. That distinction was everything. We said goodbye outside, a hug, the genuine kind, without the complicated quality of something that needs to be managed. Just two people who had been important to each other, arriving at an ending that was actually an ending. Clean, complete, with both of them present for it. I drove home, sat in my flat, in the particular quiet of an evening after something significant has been concluded, and I thought about forgiveness, about what it actually is, not the version that is performed for the sake of looking like someone who forgives, not the version that is offered strategically to close something that makes you uncomfortable, the real version, which I had been uncertain I possessed until this particular set of circumstances had revealed it. It is not the erasure of what happened. It is not the pretense that the wrong was not a wrong, or that the pain was not real, or that the accommodation made over years did not cost something genuine. It is the decision to stop letting the wrong define the present, to take the weight of it and place it somewhere that is not inside you, not into the other person, not back at them in the form of ongoing punishment, just down, to stop carrying it, because carrying it past the point of its usefulness does not serve anything, does not correct the wrong, does not return what was lost, just cost the person carrying it, continuously, in ways that accumulate until the accumulation is the thing, rather than the original wrong. The weight I had been carrying had begun to feel like something I owned, a justified possession, a reasonable cost of having been hurt genuinely. It was those things, and it was also simply heavy, and putting it down, when the right conditions had been created, when the account had been given and received, when the genuine change had been witnessed and acknowledged, had produced the specific lightness that my friend had described, that I had felt before I had the language for it, that I now understood as the particular gift of a forgiveness that was real, not given for anyone else, given for myself, because the weight was mine to carry, and mine to put down, and I was ready to put it down. Forgiveness is not a gift you give to the person who hurt you. It is a weight you finally agree to stop carrying. And when the time is right and the account has been honestly given, putting it down is the most useful thing you can do for yourself. If this story resonated with you, the specific apology, the real change, the forgiveness that was for you, not for them, leave in the comments. I read every one, and the next story is already waiting for you.